The best clinical operations people that I know, they're extremely pragmatic and extremely creative people.
Okay.
Oftentimes you have challenges in clinical operations that if you follow the book, everything that you expected to do, maybe it's not the right answer. You have to be compliant, yes, always, and run things through, GCP and everything. But those people who are the best ones, you know who you are, they think outside of the box and they are very creative.
Have you ever noticed that LinkedIn is not an accurate representation of who people really are? Welcome to Season 2 of Leadership Lab, the show where I take you with me as we do a deep dive on some of the most interesting personalities in the life sciences industry today. In order for us to do so, I need you to unlock your phone and just tap the bell. The goal of this is to inspire the next generation of leaders to create value for them and really tell the stories that will allow you to get where you're trying to get to in your career. You ready? Let's go. So, welcome to the Leadership Lab. My name is Maurice, and today I'm joined by Tiago Nunes. Tiago is the SVP, so Senior Vice President of Clinical Development at Mirum Pharmaceuticals. Tiago, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You know, we actually spoke earlier this week, I think it was yesterday, and you asked, am I the first clinical person that's going to be on here? And I had to think and went back and I said, yeah, actually. And when we met initially last year, I was really taken by the excitement with which you spoke about your job. And that's why I thought it would be really cool to have you join. So I'm glad to have you here today to...
Maybe it was too much coffee?
No, I mean, I'm already on that trip today. I'm feeling pretty pumped up though. So what we usually do is we're kind of going to go back. And the purpose here is to explain to people who maybe want to do what you do one day. Maybe you're just starting out, you're finishing maybe you're starting to be a doctor, maybe you're doing your PhD, and you want to one day develop drugs to serve patients that are basically have unmet need. And maybe we can kind of guide those people or at least give them a little bit of advice in terms of how you got where you are today. Sometimes there's a plan, sometimes no plan. And then I think it would be also really cool to explain to people maybe in the latter part of what exactly this job is and how can we relate that back to a broader public. So first of all, let me ask, where are you from originally?
So I'm from South America, Brazil, and my hometown is Rio. And usually people think about Rio as a tropical paradise that people go to spend their holidays, but that was actually where I used to live. So it was a nice combination of beautiful landscape, beautiful people, beautiful culture, but also we sometimes work. People forget, right? And but that's my hometown, and also informs or contributes to who I am as a person culturally, right? And when it comes to how I address challenges at work, I think a lot of the things that I use as soft skills, they came to me because I'm from Rio.
Okay. I mean, I've been all around the world. The only place I've never been to is South America. And I'll be honest, like when I think of Rio, I'm like, oh, it's, you've got favelas and beach and Christ the Redeemer. And people think of it as, oh, it's all party and it's dangerous. These are kind of the stereotypes that come to mind. How would you say it was? I mean, did you grow up feeling those things, or was it just like, hey, no, this is life and I feel pretty comfortable and safe with where I am?
That's such a good question. So for me, because I'm from Rio and my family is from Rio, generations in the same city, I didn't know elsewhere. I didn't know like how it is to live now I live in Basel, right? How it is
just
to live
the same
in
kind
Europe.
Of place. Yeah. It's almost exactly the
for
same
me.
thing.
For me, this is actually life. And then if you go, and I was such a movie fan, right? I love cinema, and I used to watch American movies. And American movies, most of the times, big cities with the same problems as Rio.
Yeah.
So I never had this thinking that, oh, this is different, or this is something that it is a challenge. For me, it was like big city problems, right? Violence, poverty, and so it was never something that I was thinking about, never.
So what did you do? Like when you were a kid, run around the beach, lifting weights?
Yeah. So not really. So Rio is divided in two main areas. So South Zone
I have no idea.
and North Zone.
Okay.
The south zone is what you know of Rio when you see like photographs and videos, the touristic part, right? It's south.
Okay.
I come from the north zone, which is not so close to the ocean. So we actually have to take a car, drive like 40 minutes to get to the beach. So it's like kind of the Rio, right, for Brazilians. And for me, it was more like it's like growing up in New York. It's buildings, right? It's like concrete jungle. And then my friends were actually people in the building, right? And usually Brazil, you have, because everybody lives in buildings, you have like between the main entrance and the apartments, you have what we call playground. Is a floor where you have like basically an empty concrete park where kids play, right? Sometimes they have like a swing. Sometimes you have like
in the building?
In the building. Sometimes like a basketball court or something. But it's where kids socialize. So people say, "Oh, I go to the playground. This is where to meet my friends."
Okay.
And the people from different buildings, they don't know each other. So this becomes your microcosm within this concrete jungle. So me growing up was in my building with my building friends, on different floors, going to the playground to play soccer or to do stuff. But it was very within this microcosm, right?
Why was it in the most places you got it outside?
Yeah.
Why inside?
Because the thing is, it is a big city, right? So big city with traffic, with violence, with noise, it's not. Sometimes I hear in Switzerland, see those 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds going to school. I'm like, you don't do this. Actually, it's a big deal when you are allowed to go to school by yourself when you're like 13, really 14, and then you have to take the bus, the normal bus, to go to school. I remember I was so proud of myself. I'm taking the bus, right, to go to school. So it is because of this big city vibe and all the challenges of big cities that usually kids, they stay within their own communities. Okay. If it's a gated community, it's there. And if it's a building, it's more like in this playground. So it's not, there is not so much about like going outside to play. It's going downstairs to play.
So staying out of the sun, staying out of the danger.
Exactly.
And then you go to school, you come home, you go to your apartment, you come back down to play, and then you go back up to your apartment. Okay.
Exactly.
What about, now I'm interested, like with respect to the school itself, was there a lot of activities attached to school? Like was there sports or after school activities, or it was just show up, learn, and go home? Or
That's such a good question. So Brazil has a very particular organization when it comes to the educational system that actually, I think some countries, they have the same, but it's not so common because of the population and how we are big, right? More than 200 million Brazilians. And what they do is, because the educational system is too small to really attend to all these people, the day at school is divided into morning and afternoon. Mm-hmm. And actually morning and afternoon have different classes, different people coming. So I studied my whole life in the afternoon, so not in the morning. So basically I would get to school like around 1 p.m. and then leave school around 7 p.m. And this would, exactly. And then in the morning, it's different people, different teachers. Is that almost like a different school?
So what did you do in the morning?
So in the morning, you do homework like you do like after work here. Okay. Yeah. So you do the homework, you do whatever, you go to swimming classes, you go to English school, English classes, you do stuff, all the outside of school stuff you do in the morning. And then the other way around, people who go to school in the morning, they have the afternoon to do their, after school kind of activities.
Okay. I never knew.
I think that's more common in huge countries with a lot of population and also so much resources, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what were you like as a kid? Were you?
I was a nerd. I was a geek. I was basically always watching movies, reading books. I was not so good at sports, but actually I was a good goalkeeper when it comes to soccer. But I was not like the guy who was very athletic and really like I used to hate physical education. PE for me was like the worst class. Yeah, I was. If you have a word to summarize who I was like a bookworm, geek, nerd kind of guy.
What did you geek out on?
So when it comes to movies, was everything. I had this collection of tickets, movie tickets. That I used to collect like every year, and it was like 200, 300 every year. And I would just like compare to previous year and see if I met my record. And I was to go to the movies like twice a week. It was something that I was very, very interested in. And books is everything. The only thing that I was not very keen on when it comes to books is biographies. But anything that I could actually, somebody, usually my father would, give me some recommendations, and I would just like read it in 2 days.
Okay. What did your father do?
So my father was a civil engineer, and my mom was a journalist.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would encourage reading. I mean, I guess as a journalist. Okay. Favorite movie from your childhood, let's say, or all time, just out of interest?
Oh, that's a good question. So favorite movie of all time. So I'm going to go with something that I watched so many times, like the original Indiana Jones trilogy with Harrison Ford,
Okay.
right? The first 3 movies, I think each one of them, like, 100 times. I love those kind of adventure, old style kind of movies. Yeah.
I tried to show my
comfort.
kids. I tried to show my kids, and then the first part with the snakes, when he's pulling up on the boat and all the snakes are there, and my daughter, she flipped out, and that was the end of that. We didn't even get to the Galima, when he takes the heart out. That part,
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, we didn't get to that. It's taboo again. So we're going to try it again maybe in a couple of years, but it didn't work.
And actually, professionally, because of Indy, because of Indiana Jones, and because I used to love 007, and this came from my father as well. My father used to be crazy about James Bond. I wanted to be actually an archaeologist spy. That would be like my aim for many years. Was like, people, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a spy who is also an archaeologist.
I'm just trying to think how you would combine those two. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is one out there.
I'm sure there is.
I mean, it's a great way to get into other countries. I'm just here to do a dig.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. You're not an archaeologist, nor a spy, that I know of.
Maybe.
So what set you on the path to study what you studied?
That's a very interesting story. Because I think I went through different phases when it comes to, when I was 15 and I started actually to think seriously about, what I'm going to do. If I was listening to my passion and my, my habits and the things I love, I was thinking about going to film school, right? I want to be a movie director. Yep. I love this too much. I want to tell stories. I want to connect with people, and I want to do this via film. That was my idea. And then, my father and my mom, they're very straightforward with me when it comes to possibilities for a filmmaker in Brazil, right? It's not impossible, right? But probably it's going to be extremely challenging. And you have to think about making a living out of what you choose professionally. So maybe something else could be better.
What age were you when they had that talk with you?
Oh, when? Because I was talking about this often, right? Like, Mom, I think maybe film school, and well, son, I don't want to support you until you're like 65, right? So,
fair.
And then the other thing that I was thinking about is like getting back to people. This was very important because of my upbringing and my family. They're very social conscious people about helping the community and give it back to the person next to you. And medicine was something that was always there as a possibility. And back in the day, that I was thinking about this. I thought I was the only doctor in the family. Later discovered, because my father started digging into the family tree, that actually I was not the first doctor in the family. But back in the day, I thought I would be the first one. And this was something that was very attractive to me because of the patient relationship and also the science part, like to become somebody who discovers something new. I loved research since young. So these were the two things. And then in the end, my parents I think they won this battle.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it's a practical conversation, and I think parents have a responsibility to kind of guide.
Give advice, right?
Yeah.
It's not that they told me what to do, but think about it, right? Seriously.
What age did you decide?
Basically, by the time I was 17, I already knew, which in Brazil is very challenging because there was back in the day a national exam. They don't take into consideration your school record. It's basically, it doesn't matter what you did in school, it's just the exam. So you go and you do the national exam, and then you can, for different universities, there is a different national exam. It's not only one.
Okay.
So you go, you're tested multiple times, right? And then if you don't make the cut, the only thing that you have to do as an option is to do it again next year.
So they don't care about school, just the test result.
Just a test.
It sounds like my kind of system. I would have loved that.
It gives you, so, and I can tell you, I was not the best student. Through my school years, I only became one of the best students in the final 2 years because I realized, oh my God, this is serious. I want to go into medical school. But if they were to take all my records, it gives you a chance to reinvent yourself, right? Yeah.
Fair. I mean, in the end, I mean, you're an idiot until you're, I don't know, at least 16 or 18. And
exactly.
If you're going to count all of that, I think it's, where am I at that particular moment? When I'm 18, have I got a clear idea? Am I smart enough? Can I recall all the things I was supposed to learn? And can I reason properly? And I think we put way too much emphasis on that whole, where I came from.
Yeah.
It was always counted. And then they took your grades. It was only your grades. There was no entrance exam to be done. You just did your final. And different schools had different standards. So they had weightings for certain schools versus other schools. It was a weird system. But in the end, I mean, we all get there at some point. Where did you study medicine?
So this is the top university in Brazil. So it's the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
It's basically so in Brazil, all the public universities are the good ones, and the private universities are, not bad,
Careful.
but they're not as good as the public ones.
Okay.
Which is different from, in many countries, is the other way around.
Yeah.
So in Brazil, this is the way. So basically, if you pass the exam and you get into a good public school, you go to the public school. If you don't get the position, but your parents have the money to pay for it, you go to a private one. My parents told me since the beginning, and it was very clear to me and my brother, there is no way we're going to pay. Not because they don't have the money. It's because they both studied in public schools. So you're going to pass the exam and go to a public school. So I passed to study in the best one in the country back in the day. And it was like 100 students, med students on the first year. In Brazil, there is no pre-med. So at 17, when you pass the exam, you are a first year medical student in university. So it's very early, right? And you're already seeing patients actually, very different from Germany, for instance, that you see patients really late on. In Brazil, since year one, you're seeing patients.
When you're 17.
Exactly.
If I had a 17-year-old come in to tell me how I'm doing, I'd be, no. Yeah. Get some guy with gray hair in here.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the first year is more like your observation, and then the doctor is going to say, can you, Thiago, measure the blood pressure, right? And then you do a measure the blood, But it's important because a lot of people give up really in the beginning because they realize this is not for me. This is
fair,
right?
Fair. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
I think also when I was in the faculty of pharmacy, and then they said, okay, but you got to go do a placement, I think in a second year, and they put me in a pharmacy. And I know you can do a lot more with a pharmacy degree. I knew that, but then I thought, wow, this is what I could do later. Like I don't want to do it because I was mixing creams and counting pills and these kinds of things, and I just thought, no, this is definitely not something I want to continue with. But okay, so you're 17. I mean, again, I'm just picturing a kid with like
I was 18.
Okay.
Because I didn't. There is the catch in the story is I didn't pass the exam.
Okay.
So I finished my school years. I didn't pass the exam, and then I tried a second time, and then on my second time, I passed, and I ended up in the best school in the country. So this was a big learning for me since the beginning that I know, and a lot of my friends, they gave up. after the first time. They went, in different directions. And I was like, no, I'm going to study again.
What did you do? The year in between you just studied?
I was just study for that exam, multiple exams at the end of the year. So I spent the whole year. And now actually at the end, when I got into medical school, I knew so much because I had to study so much for that year. I think it was the best. And maybe 17 is too early, right?
I'm just picturing a kid with like a barely there mustache, and
it was me.
Still his voice. Hello, sir. Like we're gonna take your blood pressure now.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go through med school. Do you guys have to specialize, or is it just internal medicine and then or how does it work?
So in Brazil, it's 6 years. So you go through the first 4 years includes a basic cycle, which is basically biochemistry, anatomy, histology, and then at the last 2 years of the 6 years, we call internship. And for those 2 years, you do rotations in different areas, and you can choose. There are some which are compulsory, like you have to go to study pediatrics. It's also OBGYN is compulsory, but all the rest you can actually pick and choose.
All right, so you graduate. You're a doctor, but you also did a PhD.
Yes.
Where was that?
That was in Barcelona.
Okay, so tell me how you got from Rio to Barcelona.
So I was in Brazil. I finished my medical school 6 years. Then I went for a GI residency. I wanted to become a gastroenterologist because I fell in love during my 6 years with GI diseases, right? Especially inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis was my passion, right? And I wanted to do
as much as film, or
so it's interesting. It was like they're living together, my two passions.
So,
right?
I mean, how do you? For me, it's a little bit hard for me to imagine being really so passionate about GI disease. Like, what about it is so interesting? Or
everything was so rational. If you think about like endocrinology, or you think about cardiology is a lot about physics, right?
It's a machine.
You have to understand the physics of that machinery. In endocrinology, it's about signaling and all the hormones. It's very, very complicated and difficult. GI, it's just a tube, right? So it's a tube. It's a very long tube, right? Exactly. It begins there, ends there. And it's very straightforward, right? Everything was very simple for me. And this was one thing. And I loved the simplicity of it, but also the importance of it, right? Yeah. Because if you don't have your GI functioning well, you're very sick, right? And can really bother people when it comes to symptoms. The symptoms are so I think I was reading something like very recently, basically mapping the symptoms, most common symptoms people have that trigger them to actually look for a doctor. And GI was like the top one, right? If you're not functioning well, right?
Yeah.
So this was the beginning of it. And then when I was really in my residency, why IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, is because it matches the tube, right? The simplicity with it, with something that for me it's very interesting, which is the immune-mediated diseases, right?
Yeah.
Something that gets deregulated in your body, in your immune system, that actually makes your immune system attack your own self.
Yeah.
This was always for me something that was so interesting. And the combination of these two things, one more complicated and the other one more simple, I think made me really love GI or IBD in particular.
Going to get off track, and let's just spend a minute on this, but I want to get your opinion on the vagus connection and the research that's happening today in terms of like how our guts affect our minds and depression or anxiety or whatever you might have. Just really quickly, I don't want to spend too much time as we get back on track, but what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's kind of new research, although it's been around for a while.
Yeah. The gut-brain axis has been around for a while.
Yeah.
And now we have not only gut-brain axis, but we have liver brain axis. We are coming to the conclusion that the brain is the mastermind, as some people always knew, and it's connected to everything, right? And the gut-brain axis is very interesting because there is a whole bunch or a part of GI that is the functional GI disorders.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, irritable bowel syndrome,
Yeah.
right? IBS.
Yeah.
So IBS, you have all those sometimes severe symptoms of constipation, diarrhea, pain. But if you do a colonoscopy, right, you're not going to see anything organic happening, right? So the tube looks amazing,
Yeah.
but you feel very sick.
Yeah.
So how can we reconcile the fact that there is not organic disease, but people feel not great, right? And now we know that this is possible because there is this intricate connection between the brain and the gut. And actually, the gut is one of the most, the largest nervous system linked organ in the body is not the brain, is actually the gut, because your gut has a lot of different nervous cells, right, that function as a brain outside of your brain, right? So, and now we know that actually the tube, when you investigate, it looks nice, it looks perfect, but really it's not, right? There's something there, some impairments and deregulation happening at the brain of the gut. So I think that when it comes to probiotics, for instance, treating anxiety and depression, for some people it's like crazy. How can we give like a bacteria strain to somebody and this anxiety goes away or this depression goes away? I understand because I was in the field. This can happen because sometimes your microbiota deregulation affects the little brain that you have in the gut, and this has an impact in the big brain in your head. So for me, this is fascinating, and I think for me is the future for functional GI disorders. And I think that the more we dig, the more we find that we don't understand yet the full picture.
All right, everybody, eat your veggies. Okay, so Barcelona, okay, GI tract. So what was your PhD on?
My PhD was in IBD, inflammatory bowel disorders, disease. I was in my last year of residency in Rio, and then my mentor was a guy in Rio that had stayed abroad in the US for a while, for many years, and he had a lot of acquaintances when it comes to research. And then his friend in Barcelona, they did the PhD together in Cleveland, called him saying, my Argentinian PhD just quit because she wants to be with her boyfriend in Argentina, and now I have nobody to help me with research. Do you know anybody that can help me? And then he looked at me. I was just there. He looked at me, Thiago, you're perfect for this. Do you want to go to Barcelona? I'm like, when? In 2 weeks. I'm like, in 2 weeks? I'm finishing residency here. So, and it was like that. I was basically, it was a matter of weeks. I saw myself in Barcelona, and this was not my plan. My plan was to get into research and to do a PhD in Brazil, not necessarily elsewhere, but the opportunity just came to me and just grabbed it.
What was your decision process?
Very simple. Barcelona, PhD, everything covered by an European scholarship with this guy who is one of the most important guys in inflammatory bowel disease.
Okay.
No brainer.
No brainer.
Yeah.
Okay. So you complete the PhD in Barcelona. World is your oyster. What was the first post grad, or what did you do after the PhD?
So my PhD was supposed to be a basic science PhD because I wanted to know more about bench work, being in the lab, doing things, experiments. And then when I came to Barcelona, because of politics, the head of the lab told me that this is not going to fly, this is not going to be possible. I don't like your mentor, so you're not working here. By the way, I like you, but you're not working here. So we had to shift it. We have to shift my PhD into clinical and do actually clinical trials during my PhD. I was not in the lab. And that connects to the future later on. But it was my first interaction with the clinical study mechanics when it comes to the site, the hospital.
All right. Yeah. Hold that thought. So after that was finished, what did you do next?
So after my PhD was finished, I decided to pursue finally my basic science training and go for a postdoc in Germany in the Technical University of Munich. And this was to stay in the lab doing translational research with mice and animal models. And that was when I realized that my dream to be in the lab, actually, I didn't like it.
Okay, we have that in common.
Yeah.
I just had rats biting me all the time while I was trying to inject them with stuff.
And I love animals. I was having having nightmare with mice.
I did the first 2 weeks that I got in the lab. I had dreams about the rats.
Exactly.
And the rats, they were coming back to get me, and it was like I don't want to go into it now, but it was we can talk about it afterwards. But okay, so you achieved the dream. It wasn't the dream. And then what happened next?
Not only wasn't it the dream, Dick Haller, who is this amazing guy in Germany, in a technical university of Munich, his research is in GI and inflammation. And he told me, I think it was at the end of the first year, this is not for you, right? And I think it's so amazing. I always when I meet Dirk, I thank him for telling me the truth, right?
Yeah.
Because he realized that not only I was not happy, it was not my talent to be like pipetting, PCR, ELISAs. I was never very organized, and my lab book was like a nightmare. And following the procedures when it comes to the experiments was really challenging for me. I'm more like a creative person, and then I always was that moment I realized that actually giving feedback at the right time, with honesty and kindness, right? It can change lives, really.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, we try to do that in interviews with people already. Sometimes we have to tell people, look, this is not going to work, and here's why. And oftentimes they're upset, or even when we coach them on their interviewing. I mean, I have many people where I've told them, okay, you're doing this and this and this and this wrong, and usually they'll say, you're the first person that's ever told me that, and then they'll get the job and say, hey, now I actually tell this to people when I'm interviewing them, and I give them feedback. So I think it's really true. Feedback's a gift, as you say, given at the appropriate time and in the appropriate way. Okay, so Dirk kind of said, this is not for you.
Really, yeah.
So how did you feel actually at first about that?
It was tough. Was not something that people like to hear, right? But it was quickly I realized it was true.
Yeah.
Right. I think there are times when you plan something ahead of time in detail, and you believe that that's your goal, even if you hate it. I think subconsciously you just insist on it because it's because you blame others, you blame situations, you blame everything but you or your dream that it's not appropriate or the right thing for you to do.
Yeah.
And then I think I quickly realized that he was right, and it was time to go back to Rio, go back to staying with patients. This interaction between people is what is interesting. Actually, even like when I was thinking about film school, was about actually telling stories and connecting with people.
Yeah.
And I think through medicine, I had that, and I was missing that. I was not having that with mice. And then I started planning to go back to Brazil.
Planning. What happened?
Life happened.
Okay.
So life happened. So my partner back in the day, who was still my partner now, so we are together for 25 years, he was having a PhD in Bern, in Switzerland, and then he was finishing his PhD. There was a mismatch in our plans in 1 year. So I'm finishing my postdoc, and then I wait for you for 1 year to finish your PhD in Bern, and then we go back together, to Rio. That was the plan. And this
but you had met in Europe.
No, we met actually in Rio.
Okay, and then both of you came to Europe, and then
it was more like I came to Barcelona, and then 2 months later he arrived to do a master's in Barcelona.
Okay.
So we kind of, when I decided to go, we as a couple decided to plan how can we do this together. It worked, right? Because now we're together for 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, you would have been 23 at the time or so.
I was
when
very
you were
young,
That's
exactly.
pretty good for you guys to pull that through. I mean,
Exactly.
That's not easy.
It was not easy, and it was a lot of searching. Actually, by the time I moved to Barcelona, his master's had finished enrollment. No new people that year. He called everybody at the University of Barcelona to actually reopen the process so he could apply. So there are times that you have to do stuff that really it's beyond, what people expect. But we got it, and then I had this 1 year gap year, let's put it like this, to just be in Europe and and wait for him.
Yeah.
But then I didn't just wait. I met people, and then I was having fun, not doing anything professionally for that year. But then a friend of mine that I met told me, Tiago, have you ever thought about actually staying around in industry? And actually, I was so surprised because I didn't know what it is that I can do in industry. I'm a doctor. I see patients. This was not something that it was on my radar. And then he said, well, there is this position. I work, as you know, I work for Nestle. And there is this position for a specialist in GI disease. And I'm like, sorry, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't make chocolates. I have no idea what I could contribute to a company like Nestle. No. Nestle has a business that is basically devoted to clinical studies and developing pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. So this is not about Kit Kat. This is about creating something that can treat people with different disorders. I'm like, okay, let me see this. I saw it. I thought it was interesting, and I'm not doing anything. I'm killing time here, waiting for my partner to finish his PhD. So I applied for the position, not expecting anything. And then I got to Lausanne. I met the people. I met the team. And then he made an offer.
Okay.
And then my plan originally, and Gabi, if you're listening to this, Gabi was my manager, future manager there. My idea was not to stay. My idea was I stay for 6 months. I wait for my partner to finish his PhD, and then we go back, right?
Okay.
But then that turned into almost 6 years working for Nestle.
After that?
So after that, it was COVID. And then I was at home, really, because I'm a social person, I was really, really feeling, the burden of really staying at home and not having the human connection because I was not traveling to Lausanne. I was still living in Bern because he was finishing his PhD there, and I was going to Lausanne every day. And then I was so bored that I started taking calls. Not that I was looking for a position, but people would come to me because of my profile. And then I said, okay, let's hear what people have to say. And usually I was like having very quick conversations saying, this is not for me, I'm sorry, blah, blah. And then one guy called me and said to me very quickly, Tiago, I think this is the right fit for you. This is GI, this is rare disease, this is in pediatrics, and actually it's Basel. And I always knew that actually eventually I'll have to transition to a more pharma, biotech, standard kind of context.
Yeah.
Because, that's not what was the bread and butter of Nestle. And then, okay, I'm interested. So what do I have to do? You just have to take a train and go to Basel to meet this guy. I'm like, meeting people?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Sign me in. So I took the train, met Thomas Jacqueline, who was the head of clinical development at Mirum back in the day. And then the moment he opened the door and we shook hands, I knew it. I thought this position is mine and I'm going to work here. It's such a weird feeling when this happens. And it actually happens to me, not quite often, but in very important moments in my life, I have this feeling of belonging that, it shows me the way in a way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sometimes you kind of know you got it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
without even an interview.
Yeah.
I knew.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your job at Mirum?
So
what were you tasked with at the beginning?
So I joined Mirum almost 6 years ago as a senior director for clinical development. Back then, I already knew, of course, what clinical development was. I was passionate about it. I fell in love with this in Nestle. Also, I discovered in Nestle not only clinical development, but I discovered rare disease. I was working in phenylketonuria, PKU, which is a disease where kids cannot metabolize an amino acid. And then I was able at Mirum to combine the rare disease passion that I have and a very hands-on approach of biotech, because that's what I love. I love actually participating and getting my hands dirty and doing stuff. And Mirum was very small back then. We were like, I think I was employee I don't know, maybe 20 or 19. It was a small group of people with a lot of ideas, a lot of passion. They wanted to develop drugs for kids with rare disease. So it felt so great.
Maybe you just mentioned you were familiar at that stage with what clinical development was through your time at Nestle, and then obviously learning a little bit new with respect to rare disease when you came to Mirum. But there's a lot of people out there who don't know what a clinical development process looks like. Very quickly.
Yeah.
How do you go from, let's say, the bench where somebody says, oh, look, this molecule does something to this, let's say gene-edited bacteria with a target that we're kind of looking at. I mean, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but how do we take that kind of R&D focused role, which is looking at specific molecules, to getting something that a patient can actually take safely and effectively?
And I think that's, that explains why I'm in rare disease, and you're going to see why. It's because if you take a molecule, that is discovered, right, or a candidate for something that can treat a disease, you obviously has to test this in preclinical models, but also in humans, right? And then clinical development is basically taking this molecule from all the different stages of development, phase 1, 2, and 3, and prove that this drug is safe and efficacious, right?
Okay.
Because the assessment for a drug to be in the market is a risk-benefit assessment, right?
Yep.
So you have to prove to regulators that the drug is efficacious, but also safe. And in prevalent disease, usually that process is a recipe, right? That there is very little room to be creative. If you go and look into inflammatory bowel disease trials, it's similar designs, right? Because the recipe is there, people know what to do. What I love about rare disease is the recipe is not there.
Right.
Actually, the recipe, it is a mystery because you have an indication with a very small population and you have to prove efficacy and you have to show safety. But how can you do it if the population is so small? And that's what I love about rare disease is that it takes the clinical development process, that it's the studies that you have to design to show that, but it doesn't give you the recipe. You have to be creative and find a solution.
Explain to us quickly, what is a rare disease?
So a rare disease has different definitions in different territories.
Okay.
Let's give, for instance, the definition that we have orphan disease in the US, which is less than 200,000 in the country, right? So the prevalence is less than 200,000. But it can have ultra-rare indications that have different definitions. There are those diseases that actually it's a handful of patients, for instance,
Yeah.
or, which it is a challenge for clinical development because, as we discussed before, how can you run studies? And sometimes it has to be placebo-controlled studies for populations that actually they're so small that to find them, it's already a challenge, right?
Yeah. Okay. Not to sound cold or callous, but in the end, medicine, in many cases, pharmaceutical companies, they need to make profits. Right? And this is such a small patient population. Of course, we want to serve everyone we can, but it's extremely difficult to do so. Why have we seen such an increase in terms of companies treating rare diseases in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years?
I think the first thing that it's very important to realize is the awareness, right? Nobody understood or knew about these indications. Some of them were described just like early in the 2000s.
Right.
Some of them actually have parents founding their own companies to investigate their kids' disease.
Wasn't
because
that Lorenzo's Oil? The
exactly.
movie Lorenzo's Oil was just about that, right?
And I went to a rare disease conference and I realized that Lorenzo's Oil is actually, it's not one case. There are so many cases out there of parents funding their own research to find solutions. So one thing is awareness. I think it became very evident that we have prevalent diseases, but we have all this endless number of conditions that nobody's doing anything about it. So this is one thing. And the second thing is the discovery that actually you can have a business with rare disease.
Yeah.
I think back in the day, in the early 60s and 70s, there was, and even like in the 80s, there was this perception that it's impossible to actually make profit or or to address an unmet need, but at the same time make a business thrive. And I think now we know that there are business models for rare disease. Sure. One thing that is changing, and I like this change, is that rare disease came through different phases. There was a phase that only small companies, very small companies, were doing that and addressing that need. Then we came to a phase where a lot of acquisitions were happening, and big pharma created their own hub when it comes to rare disease departments, spin-offs of big pharma going this direction. And now we are in this phase where this is going back to small pharma, and companies are thriving as a small size and medium size, and big pharma seems not to be so interested in rare disease anymore. And I think that's so interesting. And maybe it might come in waves, but one thing is for sure: you can discover molecules and treatments for these conditions. At the same time, you can have a company thriving and in this business, and we no need to go to prevalent disease for that. Right.
How do you think the rise of social media helped rare disease kind of come to the surface, or helped people connect, right? Parents who were completely alone and really saw the explosion of groups. Do you think that had anything to do with kind of you talked about awareness, right? I've heard so many stories of people who just had these symptoms ongoing, and they were told, oh, you have this and you have this for years. And then they went on Facebook and described it, and then found a group, and all of a sudden took it to a doctor and found a specialist and said, no, you have a rare disease. Nobody knew about it before. Maybe, what do you think about that?
It is so important, especially because in rare disease, it's difficult, and especially in a heterogeneous disease, it's so difficult to see patterns. Because when you have a large population, and you can actually have the numbers to allow you to do research and see the patterns, it's easy to understand the unmet need. But when it comes to rare disease, it's so small. How can you assess what's clinically relevant for patients, right? Yeah. One way of doing this is through actually social media, right? So what are the patients talking about? What are the families actually talking about? And a lot of these organizations, when it comes to rare disease, they have their own forums or Facebook pages, where actually patients share their experiences, they share their concerns. And sometimes the concern that you have as a researcher in pharma is not the same one. It's not matching the one that actually families they treasure the most. And I think that this is so important. And sometimes those social forums can change the perception of how patients feel and what's the most important thing for patients. In one particular indication that I worked on, our target actually was shifted and changed or accommodated, different angles or aspects of the disease that we are not aware of, and this came because of those forums where people were sharing their own experience.
Yeah, and I mean, there were no networks. I mean, you have larger groups. I mean, you have like Eurodis, for example, which would be one of the biggest European kind of rare disease patient organizations, but then you have more specific ones for specific diseases, and they'll have regular meetings. But I think you always had those, but the actual finding them was really difficult. And when we saw Facebook, especially like these groups where people were able to kind of share experience, and I think that when I've spoken to people who've been either diagnosed or know somebody, were a parent of a child who was diagnosed, they said that actually the ability to just kind of be able to share with somebody who understands what you're talking about was such a huge benefit in the beginning anyway. How do companies then take that information? I mean, we have a diagnosis, right? That's clear. We may not have a treatment just yet. How do, let's say somebody like yourself, like when you have patient feedback, I mean, you're involved with a lot of GI diseases that are pretty rare at Mirum right now. How do you actually interact with the patients when you're thinking about, how do I design a study? How do I design the outcomes that people actually want? I know that one of the side effects of one of the diseases you guys treat is like extreme itching. Whereas you might think, hey, we'll treat this and that, and the itching, well, that's not such an important thing. Is patient input into designing a trial an important thing from the get-go? And how do you gather that information?
It is one of the conditions. You mentioned itching. So one of the conditions that we're studying currently, it's a condition that actually, if you go to the science books, or if you go to publications from the 80s or even before, you're going to find that actually itching doesn't even occur in that condition.
Right.
Right?
According to the literature.
According to the literature. And now we know that actually not only occurs, but it can be severe, right? So, and this is only possible because patient populations and families, they get together, they create organizations, and organizations actually interact with pharma and biotech, and we have conversations about unmet need, right? But that's only possible if people get together, especially in rare disease, because it's impossible to know what is that people really experience without these organizations. So for us, we are following the science, and the science says that actually this condition has itching, this other condition has itching, but that one actually is the opposite. They don't have itching. And for us was always puzzling. How? Because the mechanism of disease is similar, right? Why this other condition, right? And then we came to know by engaging with patient organizations that this is actually not true. And now we are publishing data, supporting new data, indicating that actually the unmet need is there, and what was published before was not actually accurate.
Okay, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, sometimes it's these smaller trials or researchers that have preconceived notions about something, and then obviously publishing something which is, let's say, not accurate. And that's the point of science, right? It's to be wrong and then to correct the wrong and slowly fumble our way towards perfection. I'd like to just shift a minute and to think about our viewers, listeners out there who are early in their career. Maybe they're finishing a PhD or they're studying to be a medical doctor, or they're in their first clinical role. You know, we've got a lot of different things within clinical. I mean, we have the clinical science piece and then the overarching development. There's operations, there's trial management. Can you break down the major functions within clinical and explain kind of what each one of those does?
Yeah, even like beyond clinical, I have people coming to me, and actually people say, "Oh, can you talk to this young guy? He's interested. He's a medical student, or he's a first-year resident. He wants to know more about industry." And they come to me. So, what can I do as a doctor in the industry? And my answer is always the same: anything.
Yeah, as a doctor, yeah, pretty much, right?
A doctor can do. So I know doctors who are in market access. I have doctors that are CEOs of companies. They are, it's in commercial. But within clinical, it's the same answer. You can be anything you want. We have one person, Ana Maria, who is an excellent industry physician that actually migrates from operations to clinical development with us at Mirum. She was her entire career in operations, which is basically the function within clinical that executes the clinical trials. And with us, she shared her passion for clinical development, that she always wanted to migrate to development, but no company actually gave her the opportunity, because in industry, as you know, once you're labeled, it's something, it's difficult to transition out of it. And we gave her the opportunity. She is an MD. And she started with us in clinical development, and I never met. She's the best clinical trial physician that I ever met. And so one thing is operations, which is
operations, making it happen,
executing a clinical trial.
Okay, yeah.
Clinical development is more about medical oversight and strategy for the studies, for the study designs, and for the clinical development plan, which is the whole strategy that we discussed before, to show that the drug is efficacious and also safe. And usually this requires phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies. Why do I say usually? Because in rare disease, which is my space, not necessarily this is the case.
Yeah,
right?
And phase 1, explain quickly what is phase 1?
So basically phase 1, healthy volunteers, right? You test your drug in healthy volunteers, and then because they are considered to be less vulnerable as a patient population, then in a phase 2, then you have the dose finding phase, where you try different doses to see which is the one that actually is more efficacious and safe. Then you have your large first efficacy study, which is considered to be a phase 2B. And then you have your confirmatory studies, that it's the phase 3, which are way larger than the phase 2B. So it's a progression when it comes to the size, but also the objectives are a little bit different. But in rare disease, that's what I love. You can be creative and do it in a way that it's appropriate to the patient population.
Okay.
Right?
What's phase 4?
So phase 4 is after the approval, there are some commitments and other studies with different objectives, but this is after the approval of the drug.
Right.
So
then make sure it's safe.
To make sure it's safe. And sometimes they have also different objectives to show different benefits and to explore different angles when it comes to the life cycle management of the drug. But if occurs after the approval, it's considered to be a phase 4.
What would your recommendation be for somebody who was considering a career in clinical? I mean, you talked about being creative. Do you think that's... I mean, I don't think of operations people as creative. No offense to the operations people out there. I mean, we have a plan, has to be followed. It's really execution, project management. But what would you say are key assets that you would want to have if you're going to come into a career like this?
For clinical operations, I would challenge you. The best clinical operations people that I know, they're extremely pragmatic and extremely creative people.
Okay.
Because oftentimes you have challenges in clinical operations that if you follow the book, if you follow, everything that you expected to do, maybe it's not the right answer. You have to be compliant, yes, always, and run things through, GCP and everything. But, those people who are the best ones, you know who you are. They think outside of the box and they are very creative.
Okay.
Yeah. But clinical development, right? That was your question. I think actually there is space for for different profiles. I have those people who love studies and love the execution of the studies and love the medical oversight of a study. And they are not necessarily the best, the most creative people, but they love the conduct of the study and knowing their patients and engaging with investigators and making sure that the protocol is being followed. And not necessarily they are the most creative. And then you have those people who are more, I'm not so much about the conduct of the study, but the planning and how to get there and the strategy, right? I think for clinical development is a very open area that can absorb different people with different profiles, to be honest.
Anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about so far?
One aspect that people don't realize is the different levels when it comes to clinical development. When you go from, you join industry and you're like a study physician, and you're at the program level, and then you're a director of clinical development and you're CMO. That these things don't necessarily they come with they have different challenges. Sometimes it is the same challenge in different ways. The reason I'm saying this is because I was talking to two CMOs, friends of mine, and I was talking about how being a CMO, a chief medical officer, which is supposed to be in clinical development, the top position for medic within the structure, that you guys, you call the shots, you decide on things, you make things happen, and the strategy is yours, and no stakeholders. And they're like, what? It is the same challenge at any level, but the stakeholders change, right? So your stakeholder is the board, your stakeholder is the CEO, and they're asking actually similar questions in the program level and the study level. And I think there is this naivety of some medics in the industry that think that, once I go and I go beyond that, I'll call all the shots and I'll make this happen. And no, it's going to be always a convincing process of discussion and joint decision making. And I think this is good, especially in pharma, that everything needs to be done in a way that it's resourceful, but also constrained. There are constraints when it comes to financing, right? So if it's not a joint decision and if it's not something that it takes a while to get there to the strategy, I think it's sometimes you can make more mistakes. So it's funny that I had a lot of discussions with younger people that say, once I'm like you, it's going to be so much easier. Yeah. I'll make all decisions. Well, let me break it to you. It's the same, but with different stakeholders.
Awesome. Yeah. Before we wrap up, we have something we like to do called a mentorship minute, right? And that's really where you would kind of think back to yourself, let's say 20 years ago, or advice, or when you keep somebody in mind who's early in their career, what would be one piece of advice that you would pass on to somebody?
Make sure that you have joy in what you do, right? And this is, I know this is different for different people. And some people, they see work as work, and outside of work is where I have my joy, and this is just a job. But I think for me, I'm not like that. I need to have fun in what I do. I need to have joy. I need to work with people that I connect with, and I think that sometimes if you are like that, and you don't recognize, because it's a daily activity, it's going to work every day, you don't recognize that the joy is not there, because it becomes mechanic. And I think I became very good at identifying, okay, I'm not having fun. And then you start asking the right questions, why I'm not having fun anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then you start, you make decisions. So for me, my advice I would give to my younger self is make sure you're having fun, and you're not having fun anymore, make changes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Tiago, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. If you made it this far, I think you might have enjoyed this. And if so, please, if you haven't done so already, like, follow, subscribe, and rate us where possible. I'd really appreciate that. And another thing I'd also appreciate is if you could share this with somebody you think needs to hear it. The goal here is to inspire, and we need to spread the word. So anything you can do to help is much appreciated. I'll see you in the next lab.